Grief is one of the few things every single one of us has in common, yet it's one of the hardest conversations to have. We don't know what to say, so we often reach for familiar phrases, hoping they'll bring comfort. But what if grief isn't something we're meant to fix? What if it's a place where Jesus meets us? Today we're talking about grief, not through cliches or easy answers, but through the life of Jesus and the powerful story of our guest, Becky Hunt. Hey friend, welcome to the Between the Pages podcast, where we explore navigating life's peaks and valleys with bold faith. Join us bi-weekly as we dive into meaningful conversations with guests, team members, and community leaders. Together we'll tackle topics that challenge and encourage, helping you live out your faith between the pages of everyday life. Friends, welcome back to the Between the Pages podcast. I am so excited that you are here as we only have a couple of episodes left in our series of deconstructing Christian buzzwords as we look at how scripture talks about buzzwords like church, grief, singleness, identity, calling. We take that into a culture phase. How does culture define them? And then how do we take these two things and live it out in our life as followers of Jesus? And today I have a very special guest with me. Becky is joining us in the studio, and it is kind of a full circle moment in a way. We met at the Called conference back in March. And so if you've been with us for the last handful of months to years, you know that Called is very near and dear to our hearts. And we were back there last March. What, 5 months ago?
Yep.
April, May, June, July. It's now August, 5 months. And we just had some really good conversations. And as we were looking at what are some other words and phrases that we want to kind of dive deeper into as a community, grief was one of those topics that came up. And I was like, I know the person to talk about this, which, you know, for some people would be like, oh, I don't want to be the one that's like known for talking about grief.
The grief girl.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But you have such a powerful story. And, you know, I was moved by listening to your workshop in March and was like, we're going to make this happen. And we're making it happen today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes. Woo-hoo. So excited. And today is also a really big day because not only are you, you know, a speaker on grief and you have your own podcast loud about loss and all the other things. You have a book called Joy Does Return. But today is a special day because you have your second book that was just released as a devotional today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that to start us off?
Well, it's called I Am Near, and it's a grief devotional for mothers who have lost a child, like me. The book actually kind of fell in my lap at like this time where I felt, man, am I reaching anybody? Is anybody listening kind of thing? And a very well-known publisher reached out to me, saw something, you know, on YouTube of me. And so Penguin Random House, somebody just said, hey, we need an author for this devotional. We want written, and you're the one. We choose you. So it's been kind of a crazy, fast-paced. Like that just happened in like November, I think is when I started writing it. And then I finished in January. I had this tight deadline and we just made it happen. And I just got in my zone. I had my coffee date with myself on the weekends.
There you go.
You know, while my kids were at home with my husband. And so it was a really healing time for me.
That's so cool. And I think, you know, especially like having that happen right before you going off to Called and like speaking about how joy does return with grief, which we'll dive a little bit into as we navigate this conversation, and just having that almost full circle moment of, you know, healing, but also diving deeper into this story, but also this ministry that the Lord has kind of cultivated in your life to talk about. And for those who don't know you or haven't really heard your story, would you just share a little bit maybe about your story with grief and in particular Gracie's story of just how losing Gracie just really changed your life in the good and the hard ways.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we're jumping right in, folks. Here we go.
Let's go.
Lock her in. Buckle up.
So my story starts. It pretty much starts with Gracie, and I was about halfway through my very first pregnancy. We were so excited. I was so ready to be a mom, and I went in for like a regular, what do they call them? Just like a heart rate. They just like measured my belly and said, okay, you're measuring your belly a little big. You might have 2 in there. And I was like, no.
You're like, this can't happen.
That's not.
We only have 1 car seat.
Yes, that's right. I have to double up the baby list.
This just got really expensive.
Yeah, right. And so they ordered a special ultrasound for me just to like check and see why things were measuring big. And they saw that this baby had extra fluid around the neck and the head and the belly. And they thought for sure this must be a chromosomal defect. Something is wrong with baby. And so they ordered yet another ultrasound and some more tests. They did like they stuck this giant needle in my belly to test things, and the test came back all normal. No chromosome issues, nothing they could see. And they did a fetal echocardiogram, which is an echo that looks closer at baby's heart. And so they found that she had a congenital heart defect. It was the same day that we found out that it was going to be a girl. And we picked out her name right away, Gracie Lorraine. And basically, the heart defect that she had, the whole left side of her heart was severely underdeveloped. And so basically they were explaining to us like what was going to happen when baby was born and all these surgeries that she'd have to go through and basically reconstructing that heart as it grows.
Wow.
For everything to work and move through the right side. Intense.
And that's a lot to be like thrown at you in one day. Like this joy of finding out, of going to an appointment for your first kid. It's a girl, like already having a name picked out, but then you also have this very significant, thing that you have to now comprehend, understand, make decisions for the baby, but also for your own safety and health. And that's a lot to handle in probably a matter of just minutes to hours.
We were making decisions right away with the surgeons, the doctors. They basically said, okay, you have to make your decision now about what we're going to do after your baby comes out. And
this was probably what, like 20 weeks?
Yeah.
And you're like, we still have 20 weeks.
Yes, it was only halfway. And so they basically said, well, there's three different scenarios. Options. Well, option 1.
Do you want the Happy Meal 1 or 2 or 3?
Yeah,
chicken nuggets, the cheeseburger, or just the fries?
Yes, just this. Yeah. I would choose just the fries. So basically, like one option was to schedule surgery, have like a surgeon all ready to go to get in there the first week of life and do open heart surgery. And the second option was to list her on a transplant list, which you could wait forever on that thing. And conditions have to be perfect and they have to have the right vitals and everything in order to get that transplant. And of course, another baby has to die right?
Right.
I never think about that piece. But so it's hard to think about. And then the other option is to just let her go. Just let her ride out naturally. And we all know where that ends. So we felt like the surgery was the right way to go. It was the only option because we wanted as much time with her as we could have.
Yeah.
And of course they were telling us, she can live to be, a young adult. There's no reason that she wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Of course, she would grow up a little bit different from all the other kids. She wouldn't, be running around, kicking them around a soccer ball or, doing things the same way. But you get
to spend a lot of her formative years as a human being here on this side of heaven.
Yep. And that's what we wanted more than anything. Yeah. So she was born on August 2nd, 2012. And she came out with beautiful brown curls and blue eyes. And she was just a little 6-pound baby. And I didn't get to see her right away when she came out because she was basically connected to all the things right away and, wheeled into another room and then wheeled off to another hospital that was, you had to go underneath a tunnel to get to the children's hospital across the way. And I just kind of sat in a room by myself recovering and, where most mothers would be in a room with their baby. And I would just go back and forth for days. And once I was discharged, that's where we spent all our time was in her little hospital NICU room. And they had at Children's Minneapolis, they have like an entire NICU just for heart kiddos.
Okay.
So it's a whole floor. And we got a few days to, hold her like a normal baby, in our arms and rock her. And then when it was surgery day, it was 6 days after she was born. She went in, the big scary double doors and was wheeled in. And we went to a waiting room and waited for like 4 hours.
Wow.
Until they came and got us and updated us. And all we could do in that waiting room, like we had all my family. We had pastors coming in, praying with us. And, my dad was reading scripture and we were listening to music. And it was really hard to be in that room. But at the same time, like there was comfort all around. And when she came out of surgery, I almost had like an out of body experience.
You kind of felt like you were in like those shows, you're there and I'm just on the sidelines. Like I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah. I know how this goes, right? Yeah. And I remember they only let us in 2 by 2 to see her. Because she had like this huge machine in there that was basically pumping all of her blood for her so that she could rest and recover. So it was like this big thing at the end of her bed, just sitting there, and it took up half the room. And I don't even remember walking into that room. I know that I was with my sister-in-law and we got to her bedside and, her chest was still open and, for the machine to do its thing. And she was very puffy and just completely out. And it was terrifying. And I remember we stayed in Ronald McDonald's house that night and I just kept on expecting to be woken up by, something.
Right.
Some doctor being like,
It's all a dream.
Come get her. And, like I just, it was tough. It's a tough spot. But as the days went on, after 7 days of being on that big machine, she was off of it. And now the goal was she still had a ventilator in her nose, and the goal was to get her off of that and wean her off of meds that were keeping her comfortable. She had a hard time getting off that ventilator. She would get really nervous without it. And eventually she had to have a tracheostomy placed. So that, for one, that, we could hold her again, because we hadn't been able to hold her since before surgery. And I wanted that more than any. She was almost 2 months old, and she was still on that ventilator.
Wow.
So we had that surgery, and after that, she started to grow. She started to do things that the doctor said she will never she'll never take from a bottle. She will never suck on a pacifier. All these things. And she just went ahead and did them all and proved them wrong.
Spunky.
She was so spunky. That is the word I use for her. She was sassy. She was spunky. She knew some doctors. There was one doctor in particular that she and I did not like. It was very mutual. And he would, when he came in, she would just throw a fit. I mean, she couldn't really make any noise. She would just like squeak. And silently scream, right? And, it was always the doctor we just didn't like. But, like, the nurses loved her, and they would tell me, in the middle of the night, they would be cuddling her and singing to her and reading scripture. Like, these nurses were amazing. And I felt like they were our angels.
Yeah.
Like God would just place them in her room, the right ones in her room.
So cool.
And so she was taken care of when I was sleeping. And once she, after that tracheostomy surgery, she was thriving. She was getting off her meds, and we were talking about, setting a date to go home, and we had 24-hour nursing care set up. We were like ready.
You were ready.
We were ready. We were doing
the plan was in place.
Yeah. And we were like doing all the cares ourselves, and we barely saw the nurses anymore. They were just there for backup, right? And it was on a Monday that my husband and I went down to, the hospital and just spent the entire day with her. He didn't work on Mondays, and it was the best day. It was the best day, her 81st day. And she was so alert. She was so wide-eyed and just refused to take a nap. She just wanted to play. Spunky, yes. And that night, leaving her so that we could go home and get some sleep and come back the next day, for whatever reason, I had a hard time leaving that night, leaving her room. And we kept on getting to the door, and then I would creep back and I would kiss her on the head.
Not yet.
No, one more kiss. I love you. And just didn't want to leave her.
Yeah.
And I wish I had listened to that instinct, that tug in my heart to say, don't go tonight. But he didn't. And we went home, and at 3:00 in the morning, the next morning, I got a phone call from her nurse saying that she wasn't doing so well and that I should come down. And so I just thought, okay, she's had a lot of, what do I want to say? The word.
She's had a busy day.
Busy day. A lot of setbacks.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, this is just another setback. This is just her saying that she's not ready to go home yet. And that's okay. And so I drove down to the hospital and I went up to the 4th floor. And when I went through the double doors, there was a lady there that I've never met. And she asked, "Are you Gracia's mom?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I've been doing compressions on her for an hour." And at that point, like, I knew what that meant. And I was just like in shock. It wasn't supposed to go this way. She was just fine hours ago. Just perfect.
Yeah.
And so walking down the hallway, right outside her room were tons of nurses and doctors and machines. And that big machine that she was on after surgery was in that room again. And they were trying to connect her and to it, and they couldn't. And they didn't allow me into the room because it was too crowded. And they, told me to sit at the nurse's station, and you can watch through the window.
You're like, this isn't comforting at all. Like,
no, I didn't want to watch. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to, I believed that, my voice could wake her up. Yeah. That, just hearing me would calm her down and she would come back. So another half hour went by. I called my husband. I called my mom. I didn't tell them too much because they still had to drive ahead of them. But I just sat there and I pleaded with God. And I said, "Give me more time, please. I need more time. This was not enough. I'm not ready." And she was gone. And the nurses invited me in. And it was just me and Gracie in the rocking chair. I rocked her in so many times, and she was wrapped in this pink fuzzy blankie, and they put her in my arms, and I noticed that for the very first time, there were no wires, no nothing connected to her for the first time since she was born. And I just sat there with her, just watching her. She didn't look the same. She wasn't that spunky Gracie. She was just lifeless, and she was growing bluer and colder, and I cried so hard. And I made her promise that I would never stop talking about her. And I've kept that promise. I started a nonprofit in her name. I wrote 2 books in her name. And I'm here talking to you today all about her. And yeah.
You're living out your promise.
I am.
To Gracie. And this, by the time that this gets published, I mean, right now it's the 4th. So this would have been 2 days ago, was her 14th birthday. Which, as we look at grief and as you were sharing Gracie's story, and we'll kind of pick up, what did those early days of grief look like for you? One of the things that I think makes grief so hard for people to talk about is there's a lot of like dichotomies with grief, because like you have the really good days, and then in a matter of hours, all of a sudden it's like the darkest day ever. There's, when you found out about her condition, like there was that joy of, it's our first kid and a regular appointment and it's a girl and here's the name. But then there's also this grief of, okay, now we have this larger situation at hand. And it's almost like people don't know how to even talk about it. Like, do you just forget about the bad things and talk about the good things? Or how do you talk about the bad things, but like be like, I'm working on the healing. I'm still healing. And then you're also like, but I don't want people to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for you. Like, and you're like, no. This is not the point of me sharing my story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like, when we look at grief and like what culture says and how does the church talk about grief, but then how do we as Jesus followers handle grief in the circles that we're in? It's hard. It's sticky. It's a gray area that people just like to brush aside. They say like, oh, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to even venture there. Now, in your story in those early days after, holding Gracie without those wires and just that almost still moment of like the true dichotomy coming in your lap of like this joy of holding your firstborn child without wires, but also like she is now with Jesus.
Yeah.
And she's not looking at me. She's not realizing I'm holding her on this side of heaven. Looking back in those early days and moments, where do you feel like you experienced God most in that season of grief?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was very angry with him. I didn't pray for a long time.
Which is like so valid because you're like in that moment of pleading, you're like, God, I just want more time. And you're like, almost like, what do I need to do to make this happen? Yeah. Like, I will literally do anything.
Like, why didn't you give her a miracle?
Right. Like, why did you do this miracle? But why did this not qualify for a miracle almost? And you're like, I can't even imagine. Like, and it's like, sometimes you just want to like scream like off of a mountain, like in anger, but also just sadness and just grief. And I always think of those moments in scripture where they tear their clothes in grief. And it's like almost you just wanted to tear your body of like, I need to get out of this experience. Like, wake me up. This is not real. This
Very
is not
Old
real.
Testament.
Yes, exactly. We're talking about this in another episode, a couple back of how I was just like, I was listening to the song How He Loves. And it was just a season where I just like was like wailing. And I was like, that sounds dramatic. But like to just come to this realization that like the Lord is so jealous for us. And like I can imagine also when Gracie passed, like he was probably wailing for her. And like, again, this like weird dichotomy of grief, like the Lord is wailing after a child of his, the joy that this child is in heaven, but also like, you're kind of like, God, why? Why?
For a long time.
And why me?
Yeah. For a long time, I would argue with him about, why did you take her? Why, one of those cliches that you hear from people in church, oh, God needed her more, or God needed another angel.
Or there's a plan.
He's got a plan. Well, I saw it that way for a really long time until he told me, no, Becky, you have it wrong. I didn't take her. The world is just so flippin' broken. And surgeons aren't perfect. Nurses aren't perfect. Medicine isn't perfect. But God did receive her. He had a spot for her, right, next to him. And ever since I started thinking about it that way, I didn't feel so angry. Not to say that I don't have days that I am not angry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not angry with him. There's this song, what is this song?
Who's it by? I'm a worship leader. I might get this.
Yeah. All my life you have been faithful.
Goodness of God.
Yeah, goodness of God.
Got it.
Okay. So goodness of God.
This is like karaoke.
Yes.
All right, hit me. I got this. If anyone needs like worship trivia, I'm your girl.
Yes. So yeah, that song, every time I would hear it in church, because it's over and over and over played
all the time. It's like the new Amazing Grace.
Yes, right. And every time I'd hear that, I couldn't sing it. I would just get
like,
angry.
God, you're not. How are you faithful in this?
How has he always been faithful? Because I don't feel like he has. I went through a cancer diagnosis after Gracie died too, and that was another point in my life. I'm like, you do not feel good right now, God. And I don't know what to do with that. And that song just kind of became the one song I always skipped over.
To your rage song?
Yeah, my rage song. All my life. No, you have not. But, it's been 14 years of hearing that song again and again and again. And now I can sing it and truly believe it, because I always thought that God didn't give Gracie the miracle. But now I know Gracie was the miracle.
Oh, that gave me the chills.
That I needed, in my life. Because I would not be sitting right here. I would not be helping other women through their loss and see that their story is important and it needs to be heard, and that society's got it wrong.
Yeah.
Like we were never taught how to grieve.
There
wasn't a class on that. Maybe there should be.
For real. Maybe your next thing, instead of a book, is like an online course of how to deal with grief.
There we go.
They're added to the list.
Added to the list of all the things.
In it, that concept that you said, that I was like, oh my gosh, it just gave me chills of like, Gracie was the miracle. And like looking back now, or ahead 14 years and where you are now, and like that promise that you made to Gracie 14 years ago of, I'm going to share your story. And that's exactly what you're doing. And the women and the families that you're helping navigate through this. And like now with our community navigating through grief, and how do we handle this? How do we talk about it? How do we live life in a way that we can talk about grief and it's okay. And we kind of had touched on it a little bit just in your story of talking about kind of those cliche phrases that, culture often tells us to like stay strong or move on or just like get back to normal. Like once you can get back to routine, like it's gonna feel normal. Why do you think we're so uncomfortable with grief from a culture standpoint?
Well, we're at least, when as millennials, like our parents never talked about a grief growing up. I never saw my parents cry. I don't know about you. Yeah. Maybe something once. That we just hid. We just stuffed it down. How are you, Rebecca? How would you really answer that?
Yeah.
right now.
Most people, well,
Yeah.
I've been working on this actually, so I would actually tell you the truth of like, it's been a rough season,
Yeah.
but it's come to like a lot of like, I even just had a friend ask me like, how are you doing? And I've made this promise to myself, like, I want to live my life more authentically with my people that I'm closest with, especially like I call them my board of directors. And it's like, these are the people that like, I'm going to share the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful parts of my life with. And how am I doing? I totally texted her. I was like, not well, actually. Yeah. Like, this is the things that are going on. And like, so, yeah. But I mean, most people would be like, I'm fine.
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
I'm okay.
We're good.
Yep.
Got nothing to report.
Yep. Because we've had so many experiences of being asked, hey, how are you? That, when we've actually answered honestly, we got a reaction that was really uncomfortable. Somebody changed the subject. Somebody said something like, oh, it all happened for a reason. Or you're so young, you can have more. All these different things. There's like an entire chapter of it in my devotional of all the things that people say. And it is just people just don't know.
They don't know how to respond. Like when someone does open up.
Yeah, they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to do.
Or they turn it back on like, oh, I've been there. And it's like, but have you been there?
Yeah, my dog died.
Have you been in my specific situation? Yeah. Probably not.
No. Yeah.
And so for you to come back and say like, oh, I've been in that season of life. Well, maybe you've been in a similar season of life, but you don't have my same thoughts and feelings. So we're going to handle maybe the similar situation very differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, after a month, the casseroles disappear and people stop showing up, and you're just expected to
go back to normal.
And that doesn't happen. Like, we only get 3 days of bereavement leave. No matter what the loss is, even if it's a child. And we're expected to go back to work. And we're expected to know how to answer questions and how to talk and have a normal conversation with somebody that you work with. Or, I remember going back to work, and I was working in a bakery. I was a cake decorator, and I remember, we'd have the radio playing all the time, and some songs would come on, and I would just lose it. And I'd go into the bathroom, and you wouldn't see me for 10 minutes. Or somebody would come up to the bakery counter with their child and plan, out the cake, what the cake would look like. And I'd just lose it, and back into the bathroom I went. And I realized I wasn't in a place where I could have so many distractions.
It's almost like you had to you're trying to distract yourself from the healing that needed to happen in order for you to continue on with your life and to heal and to also rebuild your relationship with the Lord, but also that rocks a family and that rocks a marriage too. And having to spend time with your husband and, heal together and also heal in your own time individually too. That's not something that you can just brush over with decorating cakes every day.
Yep.
And just hope for the best.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is so crazy to think yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I didn't stay that job for very long after that. But I did start a nonprofit called Cakes from Grace. And basically, I was questioning, okay, God, what am I supposed to do now? I thought I was going to be mom, working mom, right?
The PTA mom.
Yeah. And now I have nothing to show except for, a belly, postpartum belly and hormones, wackadoodle, and, I wasn't sure. And I was asking God, like, what is my calling now? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my purpose? What is the purpose of this? And he just showed me one day through a vision I had that I was making these cakes for kids with congenital heart defects, just like Gracie, and donating them for different milestones and, occasions. And I'd bring, first birthday cakes to a hospital that a kid who's never been outside of the hospital their whole first year, And for a long time, that was my way of taking care of Gracie still. And as the years have gone on, I've had, a lot of injuries with my arms, being a cake decorator. You kind of need them,
It would be helpful, at least.
Yeah.
It would be ideal.
Yeah, it would be ideal. But so many injuries and things that would come up and they just wouldn't go away. And then I picked up my book, Joy Does Return, and I started writing that. And it was my new way of taking care of Gracie. But then having this nonprofit that I worked my butt off for was just sitting there. And I had a hard time letting go of it because that was Gracie. That was my baby. That was, people.
It's kind of what you felt like you had to show for.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I had such a hard time letting go of it. And while I was writing Joy Does Return, I just kind of sat with God and said, what do I write about Cakes from Grace? Because it's a very important piece, to my story, to Gracie's story. And he just told me, it's okay to let it go because you're still telling Gracie's story. And that was your promise. So I let that go, not very easily, very slowly, little by little.
A little timidly.
Right, yeah. And he's just had me write these books, and it slowly turned into helping other women coming to me and my messages and just being like, I just lost my son or daughter. I am having a hard time with my faith, and I am questioning if God is still good. And I can speak into that, and I can help them through that moment and get them, this devotional is kind of a big deal because this is something that as a bereaved mother, I can give other bereaved mothers this devotional.
It's like this resource, a tangible thing that people can have to process through what they're going through.
Yeah. So I finally have a tool to just give them and say, start here.
That's super cool. In your journey with grief and just kind of navigating the world of grief and all that entails, for someone maybe who has someone experiencing grief or someone who is grieving, I think I wouldn't say it's important, but I think it is helpful to note what does healthy grief actually look like compared to the version our culture often expects.
Well, so for many years, I I was that person that, answered the question, how are you? I'm fine. I'm good. I didn't want the uncomfortable moments. I didn't want to have to explain myself or, even going to a dentist's office and, they always ask
They're
you.
like, it's been 6 months. What's going on? What's new?
Well, yeah. But they ask about, how many kids do you have? And you get this question all the time. And it's the hardest one for a lot of us to answer. And sometimes I choose to say, because I have 2 other living girls, sometimes I choose to say 2 because I do not have the capacity or the environment isn't right or I don't know this person. I don't know how they're going to react. Or do I say 3? Because the guilt that goes along with just saying 2.
Really hard.
Oh my gosh, it guts you.
Yeah.
But when you say 3,
there's so many questions, and after that, you're like, if I tell you an answer, can we just have no follow-up questions, please?
Yes.
Like, I'm cleaning my teeth. I can't even talk anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And, on the good grief days, like, I like to talk about Gracie, and I'll just take whatever reaction comes and
yeah.
it is
like,
what
here
it
we are.
is.
This is me.
Yeah.
This is real. This is me.
It really is a karaoke.
It really is. It's perfect. We're talking about grief with moments of fun in the middle of it.
Yes. So I think healthy grief looks different for everybody. But for me, for a long time, I stuffed all of the grief down and I didn't let myself cry. I would fight it so hard. And everything would just be harder in life, just normal stuff. But once I started allowing myself to cry and be angry,
feel all the feels,
feel all the things, I finally have made progress toward healing and finding joy. Like,
because joy does return.
Because it does return.
Circle that back around.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, like, even Jesus, we see he did weep. Like, the shortest verse in the Bible was Jesus grieving.
Yes.
Jesus wept in John 11:35 over Lazarus. But if you read that, like, he knew that Lazarus was going to be, he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. So, like, sometimes we forget that we are created to feel feelings. Jesus felt feelings. He was fully God, but also fully human. And I think sometimes we forget to allow ourselves to feel those feelings and to process through those because
he was doing it as an example.
Yes.
Like this, yes. It is okay to grieve.
Yeah.
It is okay to weep. I know
feel the feelings.
What nobody else knows, but I'm still going to grieve, you know?
Yeah. And I can't even remember what the phrase now. It just escaped my mind, but it's like you have to like kind of go through it to get, you have to go through it to, I don't even remember what it was called. I'm sure someone out there will DM us on what it actually is.
Yes.
But anyway, if you know what that saying is, you probably get what I'm trying to say. Like you have to go through that like roller coaster of emotions to like get to the other side. And because if you just keep pushing feelings down and grief, like you're going to be worse off than just feeling all the feelings. Like you're going to start isolating yourself. You're going to start pulling further away from your faith and from community and the people that you care about and that care about you because you're just so bitter. You just think the world is against you. And I think society has just pushed on us like you have to just move on and push it aside.
Suck it up,
and that's
buttercup.
right. Suck it up and move on. Like I think of sometimes like I remember like when my grandparents had passed away, like I felt like I couldn't grieve because I had to show up for my parents and like allow them to grieve. Like someone needs to like
there's only
keep
so
the
much
house
room
together,
here.
like
Yeah.
and I'll be the one that keeps the house together and then it'll be my turn kind of thing. And I'm like, looking back on that now, I'm like, that probably wasn't the healthiest thing to do. Like we all can grieve together and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Not to say that that's, a mistake to do it that way. I think we all start out that way. But, and it took me a really long time to realize, like, no, I actually feels better when I cry. Yeah. Like, there's some days now where I'm just like,
you get tired and you're like, I'm going to sleep good tonight.
When am I going to cry? Come out, right? Yeah. And then when it does release, it's like, oh,
wow,
I can breathe again.
And to like take that feeling that like you've experienced like that morning yourself. And I think as we look at like, how do we as believers and Jesus followers handle grief within the relationships that we have with other people? You look at Romans 12:15, which talks about like mourn with those who mourn. And like, one, that's like something like as we were talking about, like you asked me like, how are you doing? And I say it's fine. It's because sometimes like we don't know if the other person is going to mourn with us. And then we're like, well, I don't even have to like talk about that or handle that awkwardness. And sometimes I feel like as, we talk about this deconstructing Christian buzzwords and grief being, I think, a very big buzzword in the church, is people, can assume that people have probably experienced when it comes to grief in church. Like church has this like really incredible hope, and sometimes they can rush people toward that hope and be like, oh, it's going to be okay. Like God's got a plan, all the things, like just hope in the Lord. A question to you, and just maybe in your relationship with the Lord, but also like your relationship with the church in grief, and how you've handled those situations. What has the church gotten right about grief? And where do you think we've unintentionally missed the mark when it comes to grief? And I called the church out last week for manipulating singles in their single life for volunteering for everything. So you can call them out. We go all for it here.
Yeah. So
we love the church, but how do we handle?
It's important. The church
handle things,
but they do get things wrong. So this has been something I've observed of my own church that I've been attending for 20 years or something like that. Love my church, but sometimes, when they some churches will share stories, like an entire video, production thing of somebody's story, right? There have been so many times where I've watched these stories and sitting in church, and every single one of them talks about miracles, talks about being healed, talks about the diagnosis that was cured, right? There was even one in particular this past year where it hit really home for me. And it was about this boy that had a congenital heart defect, and he wasn't doing so well. He got listed for a transplant. They make it seem like, okay, this is going to be sad. This is not going to end the way people want it to. Oh, but he got the transplant. He's thriving. He looks like a normal kid. And he got his little miracle, And I think it's great that we can share those stories, but we're also missing the ones that didn't get the miracle.
Snaps to that.
Yep. So I wish the church would just share more or grief that doesn't turn out the way we want it to.
Yeah.
That, you know, that it's not a happy ending, you know, but this is how we dealt with that.
Well, and I think too, like going back to, you know, how was God faithful in all of this? You know, I think the church likes to talk about like, this is God's faithfulness, but we talk about it in the sense of here's the situation, and then here's the thing that happened, and it was a good outcome. God is faithful, but we never talk about, like
God
you
is
said,
still faithful.
God is still faithful. And I think too, I love the phrase even if he is still good. But we only take it like, even if it's happy, God is still good. We don't always take the even if it's terrible and hard and sad, is he still good? And yeah, I totally agree. Like I'm trying to even think of like my church, if we have had any, like we don't do the whole like video thing. Like we're not in that scale church at all here in northern Minnesota. But you know, we do have people that like will do like a Novembering service, and like people will share their stories of losing loved ones. And I think some of them share like parts of the miracle, but then ultimately we are remembering them, so they're no longer here with us. But I think even just to sit with people who are actively grieving, like, and sharing those stories and reminding people, like, even in the darkest of times, he is still faithful. And that's like what we're walking through right now.
Well, here's the other part that I've experienced it again and again. You know, when these stories are played in church, and I sit with my family in church, and a lot of times I will end up just having a hard time breathing. And I'm just crying, and it's loud and it's obnoxious. And you feel so alone. Yeah. But then when the service is done, because they always play the stories at the end of the service, right? So you go home feeling hopeful and happy.
Okay, pause there, because like obviously you've been at this church for 20 years. And so like they've seen you go through this season of life, and they've been, I'm assuming the pastors at that church were the pastors that were with you, or different pastors. Okay. Well, but either way, like you've been at this church for a while, so they've maybe know your story, or
some of them.
Some people in the church know your story. Like after they share those stories during the service, like at the end of the service, do you feel like people maybe not like look at you differently, but like tiptoe around you differently because they just showed this kid who got the miracle, but they know that you didn't get the miracle?
Yep. Oh yeah. They were at that very service with that boy and in his CHD. I remember certain people that were at that same service afterward, you know, just not, like I was visibly, like I was in a good place. I had a blotchy red face, and I wasn't saying anything. And people that knew me would, come over and say, "Hey, Becky, how's it going?"
You're like, that's not the question you should be asking me right now.
It's that, they'll say, "That was a great sermon, right?" And I'll be like, "Actually, it was really hard for me. It's really hard." And I'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then change the subject, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. It's too uncomfortable. But where I do think the church is doing better at is like there's a lot of grief shares and grief groups. I've gone to a few of them, and honestly, I didn't.
It's not your particular cup of tea.
No, we say not to compare our losses, but it's really hard when the losses are so diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need to talk to my people who know what it's like to lose a child.
Right.
And I think in smaller churches, because I have a very large church with many campuses, but there are particular people that were there, pastors that were there when Gracie passed, and we did her funeral and all the things, and they're the ones that ask, "How are you doing, really?"
Mm.
But I also think, that part where, after the service is done, the story has been told, I'm there crying, and I know I'm not the only one, because I know many other women in that same church feel the same. We've talked about it. But you feel so alone because everybody gets up and everybody leaves, even though this person way over here heard you sobbing, right?
Mm.
They just go on with their day.
And then you start to go like,
and it's
what happened to Romans 12:15?
Yes, absolutely. And I do have people in my life that can grieve with me because I've sought that out myself, because I didn't want to be isolated anymore. I wanted to have a community. I didn't want to feel alone, because a lot of times when we feel like we're the only one experiencing this, like, we feel crazy. We feel like we're the crazy one. So that's another reason that we tend to not talk about our grief or our babies, say the names, say that they existed. Because people just don't know what to do. And grief is just so isolating, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah. And I think that's where the church needs to step up.
And I think as a church and also as followers of Jesus, Jesus was the perfect example for us. And when we look at Romans 12:15, mourn with others, mourn with those who mourn. We see Jesus in John 11, like him weeping over Lazarus, even though he knew he was going to be raised from the dead mere days later. I think in the life of Jesus, in who he was and who he is and his character, what would you say is something that we can learn from Jesus, choosing to weep in that moment and choosing to feel those feelings? Maybe as we walk through our own grief, or we walk through grief with someone who is actively walking through grief.
I think that Jesus wanted to show us what it looks like to grieve, because he was with Lazarus's sisters, grieving with them. Because if he had, let's imagine, Mary and Martha are there and they're so sad, and if Jesus is just sitting there, like, you know what, it's gonna be okay. Jesus, Lazarus is gonna come back. It's like, you don't have to be sad because he's gonna come back.
I know something you don't know.
I know something you don't know. But like, that would show Mary and Martha that their grief isn't
valid.
And I think that's how a lot of us feel when we're in those moments too. There are those people that, just are like, oh my gosh, she's crying again. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry, right? he was an example of what grief should look like. And I think he was just that human part of him because God created us to have these feelings and anger, sadness, everything. And, God being fully, or Jesus being fully man, he showed what it was like to be human, Yeah.
He was a perfect example.
Yeah, he was a perfect example.
In like the least of perfect circumstances. Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be so hard because like in that moment where you're like grieving Gracie in those first hours, moments, like holding her, like angry at the Lord. And it's like he didn't lose a child, but he lost someone very close to him, and he wept. And you almost are like, okay, how can I be like Jesus in this moment? Yeah. But it's so hard at the same time because you're like, it just seems so like opposite from the world. But also you're like, I feel like I'm having an outer body experience currently. So how can I even process this? Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah.
In the kind of months, years, like your journey over the last couple years, how have you seen like maybe your walk with Jesus change, or just like your relationship with Jesus kind of evolve over this season, but it's also this new calling that he has over your life to share about this? Like, we were joking about it before we went live with the recording, but we're like, grief is not one of those fun topics to talk about, yet now God is like, this is your calling. You get to talk about this not fun thing every single day. And it's just like, you kind of chuckle because you're like, this is such a God thing to do. Like, this is such a him thing. And it makes like no sense, but perfect sense at the same time.
Jesus, every time he preached, it was controversial, right? Nothing anybody ever expected.
Yeah.
And grief is something that isn't a normal thing that we talk about. And I think that is changing more and more because, the whole, mental health crisis and such, and, normalizing therapy and everything else.
It's almost like the question of like, how are you really doing is becoming more and more the question people are asking. Like, I'm almost asking that more in my friends, like, how are you really doing? And just by adding that like one extra phrase, then just like, how are you doing? But like, how are you really doing? Is like, I think, like you were saying, a little bit of this like cultural shift that we're like feeling now.
Permission.
Yes.
To say how we really feel. And when that is broken open and the floodgates come out and all the things.
Yep.
I think it feels really good to have somebody see you and to somebody ask that.
Yeah.
Because I think we all need that, and there's too many of us who just go about life, the PTA mom who's just doing all the things and she's got it all together. And, even on social media, when you observe other people and, wow, she's really got it together. And they're really not,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
which is hard because then someone who's walking through grief, they're like, I should be at this point and I'm not. And so something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like nothing is wrong with you. Like
Yep.
social media is a whole other layer of culture that plays into, you know, how we are trying to act like we're okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is really just this curtain.
Yep. Yeah.
In, you know, it's been 14 years since Gracie was on this side of heaven and earth side. And you've had this time of probably still healing in moments and like this continual, I wouldn't say like cycle of feelings, but it's like sometimes you have to like, one thing you'll start to spiral and you're like, I need to just stop this spiral because then it's not, I know where this is going to lead and it's going to take me backwards versus propel me forwards. And a little bit kind of adjacent to your story. And I think when we talk about grief, I don't want to miss grief in the sense of like, you know, we've talked a lot about like grief in the aspect of someone physically dying, but you know, maybe for someone who might be like grieving like a broken relationship, because I think we can grieve things that are still actively moving in the world today. Like I think of like, you know, divorce and like someone could be grieving someone who's still very much walking on this side of heaven. And like, how would you maybe like talk about grief in that sense? Like, I don't know if you would talk about it in the same way, but it's a little bit different too. And I think that adds a little bit of this layer of confusion when it comes to talking about grief, because there's this grief around death, but there's this grief around like, this person is very much still alive, but you're grieving still that person.
Yeah. So
this wasn't in the notes, so I'm just throwing you for a little loop here.
So back in 2020, my bestest friend, Ashley, she shared with me that she was moving her entire family, her entire life to Florida.
Gross. It's too humid in Florida.
I know, right?
Like, and they got crocodiles. Can we talk about that? There's a lot of things that can kill you in Florida.
Yes. But
Minnesota, the worst mosquitoes.
Yeah. Mosquito is our state bird, by the way. So yeah, she shared with me that she was moving to Florida. All her 5 kids. And I grieved so hard. I hadn't cried that hard since Gracie died. And it felt like I was grieving her, losing my best friend. And I think, you know, there's other kind of losses, like a diagnosis. Like, you know, I was diagnosed with cancer in 2015. And I thought I was going to die. I thought my kids aren't going to have a mother to watch them, you know, grow up, help them grow up. I'm never going to meet my grandkids, all these things. We're just, you know, going through my, that's a lot of loss that hasn't even happened, right?
It's all the what ifs.
It's all the what ifs.
Yeah.
And I think missing my best friend, knowing that, yeah, well, she's, you know, thousands of miles away, she's still here. I still think we should be treating it the same. We should be letting ourselves feel angry, feel sad, cry in our bed all day, and tell them how we really feel about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all valid and it's all like if we just hold that in, we're not going to be able to move on or move forward.
Yeah.
I don't like the phrase move on, but Do I still see my best friend? Yeah, once every 2 years or so. Sucks. And I still cry about missing her all the time. As far as like a diagnosis, you're losing the life that you always pictured, the life that you always wanted, because everything changes.
It's like almost there's still a loss attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be like this tangible person that you're losing, but like, a loss of like this close friendship or the loss of a life you thought you would be living. The loss just looks a little bit different.
Yeah. Still valid. Still okay to grieve forever about.
Yeah.
As long as needed. Yeah.
And also still okay to talk about too. And like share how, share the story behind how you made it through and how you're still going through it.
Yep.
And healing and processing and all the things.
Yep.
That's really good. As we kind of like, I can't even say put a nice neat bow on it because it's not a nice neat bow at the end of the day. It's just like the opening, like let's open up the conversation. Let's have the conversation. In the last couple of questions we have, kind of looking at Revelation 21:4. He will wipe away every tear from the eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And, we hold on to that as believers and as Christ followers, that we will one day be in a place where there is no more grief and there's no mourning or pain and everything is made right and new. And we get to live in the perfect kingdom. And like, I'm excited for that day. Like I do love the mission that the Lord has for me here on earth, but I'm also like, but also my mission is I'm be sitting with him at the table.
Yep.
And, I think of that song, like, it's a big, big house.
Yes.
With a big, big table. With lots and lots of food. Karaoke. But
yes.
To those that are listening, those that are watching, what would you say to someone carrying fresh grief today?
It takes time with each and every feeling. Don't rush it. Just feel it. Cancel all the plans. Don't feel bad about, having boundaries.
Yeah.
It's really important to sit in those feelings and think about them and think about your person that you lost and don't let too many distractions come and just take over, because that just prolongs healing. That just makes everything harder. Take it from me, who lived life that way for a very, very, very long time. You just have to allow yourself to feel everything. Take the time. And also reach out to your friends. That's something I never did. I always waited for somebody to reach out to me.
That's a good one.
Because, when you're waiting on that person, they won't often turn up. But a lot of people
don't know what you need until you tell them what you need.
Exactly.
We're not mind readers.
Don't know that you need to talk about it. And I think just, a lot of people offer in the beginning, like, anything you need, just let me know. That is not the thing to tell us. It is not. You need to
because you don't know what you need.
Yeah.
Like,
you need to call us. You need to text us and say, hey, what kind of coffee drink do you like? I'm going to bring it over. Just tell them, I'm coming over. And then as a griever, you have to let them come over, okay?
It's a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword. Yeah.
And that kind of ties into my last question is, for those that are maybe walking alongside someone who is grieving, what's one thing you hope that they remember that they do? Reach out to that person, like show up at their house, bring them the coffee, bring them the snacks, bring them the pizza rolls, whatever. But in addition to those things, what's another thing that you would say to that person who is walking alongside someone who is grieving?
The fact that we never stop grieving, and we always need to talk about them and say their name. And we will always need that extra support, somebody to listen, somebody to just be there. Even if it's 14 years, 30 years after. They're always going to be grieving. They're always going to need the friend to let them talk.
That's good. That's good. Well, Becky, I want to first say thank you for just sharing your story and Gracie's story and being vulnerable. I think that's something that is so powerful about you and the calling that God has on your life. And for those people who maybe want to connect with you, they've experienced a loss of a child, or they're struggling with grief, how can they get connected with you? Where can they find your books? Why don't you just kind of share a little bit about, how can they find Becky?
Yes. Yeah. Well, my podcast is called Loud About Loss. So a lot of content there that you can just listen to for days and not feel alone. I like to just talk and have a conversation about all of these things that we talked about today. And I have 2 books with Gracie's story inside of them, but also just for grieving mothers. So Joy Does Return is my first book. And that's Gracie's story, my story intertwined, and my cancer diagnosis story, everything.
All the things
are in that book. And then I Am Near, which is a grief devotional for mothers who have lost a child. If you've lost a child, that's where I would go first, is the devotional. And I'm also on Instagram. My what handle?
Your handle.
My handle. I still.
That's what the kids say nowadays.
My handle is I'm Becky Hunt. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which is also Loud About Loss. I think that's it.
And if not, we'll make sure it ends up in the show notes.
BeckyHunt.net.
There we go.
Website.
That's
there
the other
it
one.
is. That's
that's the bow. That's the bow. Well, friends, like Becky mentioned, you can get connected with her through all of the channels. We encourage you to go check out her books. We'll make sure that all of that is linked in the show notes. So make sure that you take a read through that. And I think one thing as we close, just as a reflection of, not necessarily tying the perfect bow on grief, but keeping the conversation open, is that one of the most beautiful things about Jesus is that he never asks us to hide our grief. He enters it with us. He reminds us that tears aren't a lack of faith. They're often evidence of a deep love. Whatever loss you're carrying today, our prayer is that you know this. Hope doesn't erase grief, and grief doesn't erase hope. In Christ, we can carry both. And I want to send you guys off with that reflection into this week, into the next couple weeks, as you sit and you just carry this and reflect on this. And as we've been kind of talking about this dichotomy when it comes to grief of like, there's moments where you're like, this is so exciting, but then there's this moment of like, this is really heavy, of knowing like Jesus also felt the same way and it's okay and your feelings are valid. Like Jesus didn't create feelings just for us to push them away. Yeah. Like he created feelings for us to feel them. It literally says feel in the word feelings. So feel the ings. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Becky. We appreciate you just pouring into our community, for sharing your story. I personally can't wait to just see where Gracie's story goes from here and goes as this new devotional comes out literally today. August 4th. Yeah. And just all that the Lord has planned that, you never would have thought when you were holding her 14 years ago and being like, God, what's my purpose now? And sitting in that.
He's like, oh, just wait.
Like literally sitting in the fulfillment and you're like, oh, I get it now.
Okay.
There's things I still don't get, but I'm getting it. And I'm excited to see where else he takes you.
Mm-hmm, me too.
Who knows? She might be going off to like Europe and I don't know, doing a book tour somewhere.
I'll sign up for that.
Yes. Becky's publishing company, send her to Europe.
Yes.
To do a tour, a book tour. Well, friends, thank you so much. We'll be back here in a couple weeks as we wrap up our Deconstructing Christian Buzzwords series on the Between the Pages podcast. As always, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the things. We're there. We're here. We're always here to pray for you. And we cannot wait to continue the conversation here in a couple weeks. Thanks for spending time with us here on the Between the Pages podcast. At Boldly Seeking, our heart is to help you live out your faith with courage, to step boldly into the places God is calling you to, and to remember you're never walking this journey alone. If you've been encouraged by today's conversation, would you take a moment to share this episode with a friend, leave a rating or review, and join the Boldly Seeking community? You can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook to explore more resources or support the mission through giving or our store, all at boldlyseeking.online. Until next time, keep boldly seeking Jesus in your story, in your community, and in the world.